Now, first cause arguments for the existence of God have been around for a long, long time. In fact, if you want to do more of a historical look at this, and people have, you can find first cause arguments for God around the world throughout history. Different cultures, different famous thinkers throughout history around the world developing and coming to a belief in the existence of a supreme being. Even if they don't use the term God, they're coming to this idea that there is an ultimate supreme being, and oftentimes it's through first cause arguments. So let me give you a very famous one from history. And this is a first cause argument for God that Aristotle put together. And I'm going to give you a very simplified version of it. Sometimes it's called the uncaused cause argument or the unmoved mover argument. So you can start out this way. You can ask the question, is there something moving? And you can look out in reality, and even now I can look out and I can see things moving out the window out there, and you'd have to be a fool to say that nothing is moving, right? Clearly there are things that are moving in reality. Well, when we think about the things that are moving, we can ask the question, well, what is causing them to move? Are they being caused by something else? Well, yeah, it seems that everything that is moving, right, is being caused to move by something else. So if I'm moving around this clicker, I'm the cause of this movement, right? Of course, I'm moving, but do I have an ultimate cause? Well, of course. My parents, you can think of, were my cause. That's how I got here. The calories that I took in over the last few days are providing me the energy, right, to move. So there are causes to my motion as well, right? Do you see kind of this chain that's developing now? And so Aristotle, in just a very basic way of thinking, asked the question, well, can this series of causes go back to infinity? Have there been just an infinite amount of causes leading to the movement we now see? Do this chain of causes just go back to an infinite past? And then he gave certain reasons, and philosophers since then have agreed that just doesn't make sense. It causes all sorts of absurdities to propose an infinite series. And those of you maybe who have studied math a bit are familiar with some of these absurdities. But there's the hotel absurdity, the infinite library absurdity, and you can look up some of these absurdities. But my point is that when you propose an infinite series of things, it causes all sorts of contradictions and absurdities that just don't make sense. And so most thinkers, mathematicians, philosophers have concluded that there just can't be an actual infinite series of anything, including causes. And so the only alternative then, if there's not an infinite chain of causes that have come before us, the only alternative to that is that there must be some first cause that got the whole process going. In other words, there must be a cause that didn't get caused itself. It was its own cause, if you can think of it that way. It's the uncaused cause, or the unmoved mover. And so that's Aristotle's famous argument, just kind of the basic gist of it, of how he got this going. Here's another really simple way to think about it. Imagine you're trying to get to church here this morning. This happens a lot to us because we're coming down 33rd Street. We live on 33rd Street up close to Vine. And so when we're coming down 33rd Street, we often run into the railroad tracks, and there's a train going across, right? Now we wait, sometimes we wait and we're patient, sometimes we're already late for church, and so we just turn back and go another way and come down 48th so we can go under the underpass. But what do we know if we are going to be patient and wait for the train to pass? What can we know for sure? Well, one of the things we can know for sure is that the cars are going to stop eventually, right? One car is being moved by the other car, being moved by the other car, being moved by the prior car, but we know that there's not an infinite chain of cars, right? We know that there's a beginning to it, the engine. And so that's just a conceptual, easy way to get your mind around this argument that goes all the way back to Aristotle, and I would say probably even prior, but he's one of the most famous people in history who developed it and is known for it. But we know when we see movement that there is a cause, but that can't be an infinite chain. There has to be some sort of beginning. And Aristotle called that God. In his language, it would be theos, T-H-E-O-S, what we get the word theology from. So in different languages, there are different terms for an ultimate being. In the English language, we use the term God. And for now, you should be aware that I'm using the term very generically, just to refer to a supreme ultimate being. We haven't made our way to making a case for the Christian God yet. That's coming later in this apologetic methodology, this apologetic approach. So for now, I'm just using the term God in a very generic sense to mean some sort of ultimate supreme being that exists beyond the universe, that created everything else. That is the cause of everything else. A lot of times this leads to a question, and the question is, well, then what caused God? If everything needs a cause, then what caused God? But if somebody asks that question, they're forgetting the first premise. We're not saying that everything has a cause. We're saying that everything that has a beginning has a cause, right? Remember that was the first premise? And we're claiming that this first cause, this what we are calling God, doesn't have a beginning, so it doesn't need a cause. We're saying the same thing of God as they used to say of the universe, that it's eternal, that it doesn't need a cause, that it's self-sufficient. There has to be something that doesn't have a beginning. Unless, again, of course, you're comfortable with the idea of an infinite series of causes going back eternally into the infinite past. But if you reject that, as most do, the only alternative is that there has to be some first cause. A lot of people thought it was the universe, but now science has shown us the universe did have a beginning, so we know that isn't the supreme ultimate being without a cause. We're proposing instead that God is the supreme ultimate being without a cause and doesn't have a beginning. So atheists are familiar with this concept of something being uncaused. They just thought it was the universe, but science has shown that's not the case, and we're proposing an alternative and have good reasons to think that God is the ultimate cause, the eternal thing that doesn't have a beginning, that doesn't have a cause.